To go under the surgeon's knife can be intimidating and precarious even with today's modern medical equipment, knowledge, and safety precautions. So imagine facing surgery around 2,000 years ago with no advanced anesthetic, limited anatomical understanding, and the chances of dying outweighing those of coming through alive. Roman medicine was heavily influenced by their preceding Greek practitioners and scholars, notably Hippocrates and Galen, and the empire's constant military campaigns necessitated advanced medical care for wounded soldiers, leading to some interesting, yet horrifying developments in trauma surgery. Welcome to the Roman Empire. Influence of the Greeks. Perhaps surprisingly, we owe much of our modern medical traditions, and certainly many of today's medical terminology, to the ancient Greeks. And similarly, the Romans adopted the majority of their techniques, medicines, and surgical practices from the very same. Regarded as the father of medicine, the renowned Hippocrates, 470 to 400 BC, endeavored to produce a collection of over 70 scholarly works known as the Hippocratic Writings during his time as a teacher at a medical school on the island of Kos. These works covered a myriad of medical maladies, including surgery, fractures, ulcers, epidemics, aphorisms, prognostics, fistulae, and even hemorrhoids. Amongst others, these consisted of factual descriptions paired with insightful first-hand observations of real patients and their recoveries, or lack of such. Hippocrates was also extremely well versed and ahead of his time in techniques of surgical hygiene and technical skill, all of which advice was adopted by his Roman successors, evident in these excerpts from his writing about how a surgeon should conduct himself. Quote, "The nails should be neither longer nor shorter than the points of the fingers, and the surgeon should promote dexterous use, practicing all sorts of work with either hand and with both together, endeavoring to do them well, elegantly, quickly, without trouble, neatly, and promptly." Further, he outlines how a surgeon or physician should conduct himself in society and through relations with patients in the Hippocratic Oath. Quote, "I will soothe the pain of anyone who needs my art, and if I don't know how, I will seek the counsel of my teachers. I will offer those who suffer all my attention, my science, and my love. Never will I betray them or risk their well-being to satisfy my vanity. I will not hurt my fellow or put a knife to his flesh if I don't know how, or give him a herb to soothe his pain, even if he begs for it in anguish, if it might take away his breath. Under no circumstance I will use his body to advance my knowledge or my fame, unless in his last moment he or his widow give me his corpse, so that his death may help me understand how to soothe another's pain. I swear to care for anyone who suffers, prince or slave. If I ever break this oath, let my gods take away my knowledge of this art and my own health." A modified version of this oath is still used today in many medical schools, albeit updated and respectful of individual cultures and practices. Greek physicians and doctors captured on campaign as prisoners of war initially imparted their medical knowledge to the Romans and were allowed to live and practice in the empire. Later, there was an influx of knowledgeable Greek practitioners who sought the higher rate of pay exclusive to Rome. Surgeons and physicians. Ambitious medical practitioners in ancient Rome sought wealth and influence at the apex of their vocation, within the imperial household. Becoming the person's physician to, ideally, the emperor and his family, their friends, advisors, or freedmen was a sure sign of success and an acknowledgement of one's skill. Many physicians made their bones as medici, doctors, in the Roman armed forces, either learning their craft during their service or even moving over from civilian medical practice into the forces, such as Marcus Valerius Longinus, a Medici with the 7th Legion who had already been a popular member of his city council before enlistment. Reasons for this vary. Service with the armed forces would have opened a lot of doors for ambitious physicians as they rubbed soldiers with prominent military adjutants, staff officers, and even generals who themselves had their eyes on post-service influence. Ultimately, service with the legions promised travel and excitement around the empire, as well as a bloody first-hand education in battlefield casualties, surgery, and trauma medicine. Furthermore, Medici weren't bound to the same 25-year service contract of ordinary legionaries, serving a short term of only 2 or 3 highly influential years. Even excused from standard military fatigue duties, their pay was at least 10 times that of the unfortunate enlisted man. However, they earned their qualifications. Physicians were highly regarded in Roman society, first and foremost those who administered to the emperor. The famous Aelius Gallienus personally served Marcus Aurelius Antonius, his heir Commodus, and finally Lucius Septimus Severus during an extremely well-versed medical career. Much like Hippocrates, during this time Galen wrote vast, insightful medical tracts detailing surgical operations such as suturing the intestine after penetrating injuries of the abdomen, to the removal of polyps from the nose and repair of a cleft lip. However, not all that Galen taught was medically sound. His knowledge of circulation was minimal, at least, wrongly believing and teaching that blood actually passed from the heart to the tissues, arteries, and veins, that new blood was manufactured in the liver and was burnt up in the tissues like fuel consumed by fire, and that invisible pores between the right and left sides of the heart chambers allowed blood to cross this barrier. Life or death. Despite their knowledge, surgery during the Roman Empire was an extremely dangerous undertaking, and the risk of death was significant. As such, it was very much a last resort for physicians when all else had failed. Hemorrhaging during surgery and deadly infections of the wound were 2 life-threatening concerns. The former could be lessened through the use of tourniquets and cauterization, particularly so during amputations, outlined excruciatingly in the following, quote, "A band must be put around the limb, and the operator must tie or sew the vessels which lead to the parts. After cutting down to the bone, the tendons are to be retracted, and the bone must be scraped and sawn. When much blood is discharged, red-hot irons are to be applied." Trephination, an ancient surgical procedure that involved drilling or cutting a hole into the skull, usually either to relieve pressure within caused by head trauma, skull fractures, or hemorrhages, or to remove bone fragments and clotted blood from a wound, is often referenced in the previously mentioned medical tracts. This terrifying procedure was conducted using a specialized instrument called a trephine, which the surgeon would use to drill into the skull in a circular motion to remove a disc of bone. In other cases, the bone was scraped away slowly using a sharp tool until the skull was penetrated. It was a highly risky operation, to say the least. Aulus Cornelius Celsus in the 1st century CE wrote De Medicina, an invaluable source for modern historians on surgery of the period. In it, he sickeningly outlines trephination as, quote, "After the initial boreholes have been made with the trephine, the surgeon goes on striking the chisel with the mallet more boldly and more safely, until the bone, having been divided all round, can be removed without any injury to the brain. When all this bone has been removed, the margins of the opening must be filed down smooth. None of the fine inner membrane covering the skull under the scalp must remain over the bone, for whenever this is lacerated by the chisel or trepan, it causes severe fevers with inflammations. If there is a cut as part of the wound, we must take it as it is. If we have to remove it, the best incision is generally that which is formed by 2 lines in the shape of the letter X." Although they had no real knowledge of germ theory, medical practitioners in ancient Rome developed a number of practical techniques to prevent and manage the risk of infection. Surgeons would cleanse wounds with water, often boiled, or with wine because it contained alcohol, which they knew had some antiseptic properties. Alongside its acidic nature helping to kill some bacteria, vinegar was another common cleaning agent, valued for its antimicrobial properties. Dedicated surgical instruments such as probes and hooks were used to explore wounds and to remove harmful foreign objects like dirt, bone fragments, or debris that could cause infection if left inside the body. Honey, herbs, poultices, and salt solutions were also applied post-surgery to help cleanse, inhibit bacterial growth, and encourage the healing process. Wound dressings were sometimes soaked in these solutions before being applied, and they were changed regularly to prevent any buildup of pus or bacteria. Battlefield surgery. Trajan's column, erected in 113 CE to commemorate Emperor Trajan's victory in the Dacian Wars, depicts carvings of various combat scenes, including the use of Medici on the battlefield. They are shown to be bandaging wounded Roman soldiers in the field, suggesting their implementation in frontline campaigns, much the same as combat medics operate across today's armed forces. and similarly an aid post would likely have been established close to the battle site to filter different cases of casualties, such as light, serious, and surgical. Small cuts and abrasions would have been treated with a standard first aid kit, perhaps even carried individually by each legionary. However, more serious wounds would have required expert triage surgery. Gut-ripping sword thrusts, slashes, and gory severed limbs needed urgent medical attention, as did deep penetrating spear point wounds and embedded arrowheads, which would need extracting. Galen advised the following for an eviscerated abdomen wound, quote, "Swift action was essential to replace intestines left hanging out of a wound. Cleaning, stitching, and firm bandaging to hold the wound together might work if the intestines themselves had not been damaged or sliced." Or painfully that, quote, "When a bone protrudes from the wound and it cannot be reset, it should be sawn off." Uncovered at archaeological sites such as Neuse in Germany, Inchtutil and Fendock in Scotland, or Hod Hill in Dorset, hospitals would have been a part of the standard layout for Roman fortresses, complete with operating theatres. The remains of the hospital at Neuse measures 89 metres by 50 metres, neatly planned out with a central courtyard and several small rooms opening off of a corridor that encompass the building. Ready to treat wounded legionaries, stores, kitchens, latrines, and a water supply would have also been present. Tools of the trade. Skilled physicians and surgeons of ancient Rome would have owned a wide range of medical tools, each one specifically forged for a surgical malady. Steel or bronze scalpels, bone saws, probes, hooks, dental and bone forceps, syringes, and the previously mentioned draphine are just some of the more common tools that have been referred to in the texts of Hippocrates, Galen, and Celsus, and later discovered at dig sites. Archaeological exploration of the pumice-buried Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum uncovered over 199 medical instruments, many of which were specialist surgical tools. Bronze vaginal speculums for advanced gynecology and obstetrics, vectis or bone levers for resetting fractured or depressed bones, male and female metal catheters to relieve blocked urinary tract infections, rectal speculums for the examination of ulcerated bowels, or the shiver-inducingly named uvular-crushing forceps. Good God. So, would you be in any rush to go under the surgeon's knife in ancient Rome? Maybe next time we're complaining about how long we have to wait at the doctors, or thinking about how much we might have to pay, we should remember how fortunate we are to have not been born 2,000 years earlier. Thank you for watching this episode of the Roman Empire. If you enjoyed it, you can really help us out on the channel by subscribing, as we do release a new video every Friday. So until next week, cheers everyone!